Inside this log, something was alive, and no one at the factory was ready for what crawled out. We thought it was just another shipment of wood, but this was the scariest discovery we had ever made. What happened next turned an ordinary workday into a nightmare of survival. This is the true story of the Sukuri found at the wood factory. I was in Itacoatiara to film sawmill routines, the sound of the bandsaw swallowing logs as if it were eating dry rain, the smell of diesel mixed with the sweetness of wood, men with leather hands and eyes that measure weight without scales. I had come from the United States to document legal timber processing, with management plans, diameter measurements, tags, all the paperwork in place. But what paperwork doesn't guarantee is what lives beneath the bark of the world. In the yard, logs waited stacked, chalk markings, diameters noted, trees turned into perfect cylinders, as if time itself had agreed to have straight edges. The foreman told me to stay to the left, away from the saw line because nervous wood jumps. And I learned that wood has moods, that a log cracks like a bone, and that here the air is an invisible dust that scratches the throat with respect. The first different log came on the machine's arm, a thick Ituba trunk with a wide scar like a sealed mouth across its body. "Hollow," said the operator, and they laughed at the way the forest writes secrets inside itself. The cut began clean, blade singing, the world turning into planks, and I filmed that birth of lines. The saw bit into the hollow, entered the secret, and the sound shifted just slightly. No sparks, no jam, just thinned out, as if the blade had passed from wood into a silence that wasn't empty. The operator, who never misses a joke, said, "Something's in there." And someone replied, "A lizard, maybe an armadillo." No one said snake, because certain words summon more than they describe. The foreman pressed the button to release the blade, and the log, split in two, opened like a book that had always been waiting to be read. What appeared wasn't just hollow, it was a polished corridor, glistening wet, with a smell that was neither resin nor oil, wet leather and faint iron, the same smell I'd already come to know from the rainforest creeks. The helper hooked into the loosened core, leaned in by reflex, and in that tilt the world revealed what it had been hiding. The curve of a back as thick as a man's thigh, dark olive, sliding inside the tree's tunnel as if the tree were a canoe and the creature a living oar. The sound that followed wasn't hiss or snap, it was silence breaking in half. The kind of silence a whole yard hears with its spine. Nobody ran first. Here, haste charges a price. The operator raised the blade, the foreman shouted, "Back up, slow," and I stepped away with the camera sinking against my chest. The head didn't appear the way movies promise. What we saw were pieces of the world, skin brushing against fiber, muscle pushing air out of the hollow, a breath that left the log's wide mouth and licked the yard dust. The helper dropped the hook and took 2 weak steps back, because his body understood before his voice. Something alive, huge, was using the tree as house and tunnel, and our saw had opened the wrong door. The yard shifted into a language of calm urgency. Sawmill men know angles, wait, retreat. They blocked paths with boards, built an improvised fence to guide the creature out, dimmed lights, cut noise down to the necessary. I kept asking names and towns to anchor myself in reality. The operator, Raimundo, the foreman, Joel. The helper, who nearly put his face in the hollow, Leandro. Joel said without looking at me, "Don't shout. Big snakes here with the body." And the whole yard held its breath as if air itself were a tool of trade. The open log showed what years of forest had built inside. A perfect tunnel, smooth walls of fiber polished by repeated movement. Whatever lived there, probably for a long time, knew the passage blindfolded. The curve of its body showed again, pushing out dark pulp. And then the yard light caught a patch of scale gleaming like a dirty coin. Leandro whispered, "Anaconda," afraid of naming too much. Joel replied only, "Big." The creature didn't rush. It retreated deeper into the tree, reconsidering, and the yard learned to wait. I wanted to ask how an anaconda enters a trunk like that, how it stays, why. But sawmills hold answers that don't fit into reporting. What I learned there, without manuals, was that logs leave depressions, broken branches form entrances, and the forest creates mazes where wood becomes home to animals that prize hollows as cool, damp, safe shelters. And that sometimes, the saw opens the door of that home at the wrong time. When the head appeared, it was like an idea finally finding words. A flattened triangle, eyes dark as old nails, small stubborn nostrils on top. There was no extravagant threat, only presence. The yard stepped back again, and someone turned off the radio so even silence could fit better. The anaconda paused at the log's mouth, tasted the world with its tongue in a gesture so ancient it made us ashamed of being newer than it, and slid half its body back inside. Choosing is the privilege of those who rule with calm. Joel pointed his chin toward a clear corridor between stacks of planks. If it leaves, it'll take that way. And he called for a large drum with a lid, not to trap it, to guide it. It was the sawmill, accepting that the architecture of wood can also be a trail for a creature. I, the American checklist specialist, understood my role was not to interfere, and to keep filming, with hands steady enough that the story would not tremble because of me. Joel organized the sawmill as if redrawing a river. He stacked planks to create a corridor, opened a current toward the damp backyard behind the shed, and ordered all surplus noise cut until the yard resembled a sawdust church. Too much sound confuses both men and beasts when it is time to choose a way out, he explained without wasting words, like the kind of foreman already baptized by wood dust. I simply followed, instincts of curiosity held back in favor of a survival etiquette that isn't in any manual but sustains the morning, each step measured in caution, each breath synchronized with the open log, now pulsing with movement from inside, as if the wood itself were breathing. I understood then that hollow does not mean empty, but presence that chose shadow over light, which, in Brazil, is ancient wisdom for an endless summer. The operator Raimundão, who knows a saw blade the way a doctor knows a pulse, kept the machine relaxed and the blade raised to avoid snagging careless against scales, because a blade that catches on scale tears, loses teeth, and worse, provokes reaction from a body made of patient muscle, one that responds with method, not spectacle. I remembered what I'd learned in the field. Anacondas are ambush creatures, frugal with movement, using shade and damp shelter as an extension of their bodies. There's no honor in provoking what can be solved with space and a clear path. So we all stepped back another foot together, as if the sawmill shared a single spine. And I recorded the sound of a world without music. Almost no wind, sawdust settling, the whisper of skin sliding against fiber inside the trunk. It was a sound that seemed to say that time itself is a weapon, and there the one with more time was not us but her. Leandro, the helper, held his hook in the air as if holding a question, and Joel, without looking, simply said, "No," the most important word of the day. Curiosity is an impulse no saw can repair, and a face too close to a hollow's mouth is a quick road to a sad notice pinned on a wall. No one in that yard wanted notices. We only wanted the morning to end with the same number of men it started with. Out of that silent agreement, Brazil revealed itself in details. A bucket of water placed at the right spot to calm dust, a stretched tarp to cast shadow where the sun struck harsh and frightening, a large drum set aside with its plastic, directing a gentle invitation toward the backyard, and the head again close to the mouth of the trunk, only the flattened triangle, weather-worn eyes, and the tongue reading the world in the oldest text we know. I had seen anacondas in rivers before, but never their home inside a tree. That changed the map of my fear. What we call a dead shelter, a hollow, was a living tunnel, a microclimate of coolness and safety, an ecological advantage that requires no poetry to exist, only years and patience, which the forest has in abundance and the creature too. It made perfect sense that it might use a cavity for rest, warmth, shedding skin away from the sun, and perhaps for waiting too, though hunting there would be risky for her. I thought all this while Joel signaled with his chin, and two men quietly dragged half the cut log aside to open more light, more passage. Big creatures like clear exits, and a clutter of planks creates traps. We didn't want a trap, only a passage. The tongue came first, black and gleaming like a well-kept tool, teasing the air before pulling back. In its flick, the sawdust sketch revealed an invisible current flowing from the hollow outward. Then the body began to emerge, not in explosion, but in decision. A foot, then another, dark olive skin mottled with wider patches. Every inch was enough to make the entire yard shift its weight back, vertebrae aligned in respect, like an audience standing for a liturgy. I kept filming the miracle with no trick. Wood giving birth to snake, sawmill turning into floodplain, and men learning that sometimes safety means leaving the path open and the mouth closed, while the creature, master of time, chose the direction we set for her. The channel of planks, the good shadow, the damp backyard. When half the body had passed the log's rim, someone in the back dropped a plank. The dry crack echoed against the skin of the world. The head froze, the body froze, the yard froze. Brazil itself, for 1 second, held its breath with me. Joel didn't shout, didn't curse, only raised his open hand at shoulder level. The liturgy everyone understands. Wait. Waiting gave movement back to what had almost returned. The anaconda continued her line, gliding down the current of boards as if she had always known the path we had drawn. And I realized that sometimes the best we can be for a great living animal is good ground. In the backyard, the mud accepted her weight with the sound of a kiss that won't release, and she vanished like a river choosing the underground, leaving behind in the open trunk the marks of an old home, polished walls, the smell of hide and shadow. And in the yard, men went back to being sawmill after being forest for 15 minutes, with the quiet joy of those who had prevented bad news without turning it into sensational news. Joel patted my shoulder like sealing a contract and said, "Today no one talks about miracle. We talk about respect." And I, the American with my habit of measuring, chose not to ask her size, because a ruler here would be bad manners. And in Brazil, I learned that etiquette too saves lives. After the anaconda vanished into the backyard, the sawmill began to breathe again with the sound of saws, but the morning hadn't turned normal. It had only turned possible. Joel ordered the open log kept away from the blade and asked the tractor to nudge it, just enough for us to roll the halves and see what was left of the house. The core told the whole story in texture. Thick bark outside, firm fiber inside, and at the center a smooth tunnel, moist and dark, with a sheen of fine slime that made light slide down its walls. There were strands of old skin, markings from a body scraping by many times, along with bits of feather and fur, traces of small animals that had long since become meals. Proof that this shelter wasn't a visit, it was a home. No one mentioned cleaning. You don't wash a church just after it's been vacated. Raimundone drew a palm's length in the air, giving me what measure he could. Coming out head to mid-body was 3, maybe 4 meters, but that's the eye of someone who respects the story. I understood, thanked him without writing the number down. A ruler there would have been arrogance. Leandro, still pale, asked for water and muttered under his breath, "I almost put my face in there." Joel replied with the kind of sermon that doesn't humiliate. "The yard spares the ones who learn through fright." Then he ordered everyone to check their PPE, not as theater, but because that is how you return to rhythm. Boots, helmets, ear guards, gloves, and the sound of the blade meeting wood again, like someone rediscovering an old trail. I was still filming remnants, hollow fiber, the shine of the tunnel, when a short cry came from the backyard side. Not panic, but warning. The anaconda had reappeared at the edge of shadow, pressed against the low pallet fence, her head poking out like a coin, eyes alert, nostrils testing the world. There was no strike, only the gesture of measuring the distance between her and us, as if checking the work. Path clear, shadows right, calm restored. 2 men reflexively backed up more than they needed, pushing into a stack of planks that groaned like a boat. Joel raised his hand again. The same signal, you-me world in unison, slow. The snake retreated a foot, slid forward another, and in that hesitation, I understood that fear and curiosity shaped the creature too, only from her side of the skin. Her truck arrived at the back gate, its short horn routine. The sound cut through the backyard like a blade. The head disappeared, and I thought it was the end. But no. The anaconda hadn't fled. She had only chosen another angle. She reappeared where we had laid out the current, toward a shallow stream that licks the bottom of the yard when the rains rise. There was water enough there to vanish with grace. Good mud, roots for her tongue to touch, and the shade of banana trees planted out of habit and for shadow. The body slipped down the corridor, reached the shallows, and like someone knowing the house better than its owner, dissolved into the tea-colored water. It was then that I noticed the silence of the yard, all of it choice. No one spoke loud, no one tried to measure her with a tape, no one pulled out a phone to film too close for a trophy that would only turn into trouble. The sawmill felt old, seasoned, as if it had witnessed this scene many times without me. I was the outsider, with my camera and my hunger for a headline, and I felt ashamed for wanting to explain what a gesture had already explained. They opened wood, found a home, gave it an exit. Some days, the news is only that. In the afternoon, when the sun struck the piles head-on and dust glittered like fine gold in the air, Joel took me into the shade of a shed where safety posters shared wall space with a calendar of saints. "We don't make miracles here, and we don't haunt our workers," he said. "We've got rules. If a log comes hollow and smells like an animal, slow down. If you open it and find a dwelling, don't stick your face in. Draw an exit. And if you can return it to the forest, return it." I asked if it was the first time. He laughed, tired. "First time you filmed, the rest belongs to the yard." Raimundo leaned nearby, resting his weight on the leg that hurt less. "Told you wood has moods," he joked and added serious, "and animals too." I, always searching for formulas in everything, now saw protocol, where before I might have seen legend. The anaconda wasn't impossible. She was the logical chapter of life in a place where trunks become homes, for men and for beasts, and saws sometimes open doors no one planned to open. By dusk, when shadows stretched thin across the yard and the men grew quieter, tired by the light, Leandro passed by with a cup of water and said, "I almost stuck my face in. I didn't. I'll sleep because of that." There was no audience, no applause, only a lesson that might save another day. I filmed the open log one last time, capturing the polished walls, the dark corridor, the air that no longer smelled so strongly of hide. And I decided that if anyone asked me for size, I would answer with path big enough to teach. Outside, Itacoatiara returned to city life. Motorcycles, laughter, the heat that never gives up. Inside the gate, the yard kept a story that needed no exaggeration. And I, a foreigner with license to tell it, promised myself I wouldn't trade method for myth, just to make noise. Here, rulers are for wood. For animals, respect will do. I went back to the yard early the next day, when the dew still pinned the dust to the ground and the scream of the bandsaws seemed less fierce. The split log was where we had left it, two halves turned like pages at rest. The smell of leather had almost faded, leaving only resin and oil, the usual perfume of the place. Joel waited for me with coffee in a plastic cup and the calm of someone who'd slept enough not to make mistakes early. "Today we'll take care of the rest," he said. "We're not going to waste the wood, but we're not going to forget the house either." He explained they would cut the sound sections, preserve the hollowed core as a teaching piece in the yard itself, a useful reminder to train reflex into caution. On a nearby wall, he taped 3 thick strokes of pen. "Slow down when it smells like an animal. Don't stick your face in the hollow. Draw an exit." Raimundo adjusted the saw height with a tenderness that seemed almost affectionate, and before starting pressed his ear against the wood, part ritual, part the technique of someone who listens for vibration by trade. "Now it's only fiber and air," he said. And the yard resumed life, the motor filling the beam's chest and the blade sliding in smooth as fruit under a knife. Leandro, sharper than yesterday, kept his eyes on the work but his mind on the backyard, ready to stop it all at the faintest sign of the past returning. It didn't. The hollow became a display. They lifted a clean panel showing the polished tunnel, streaked with scale marks like a signature of presence. The plan was to screw that panel to a simple easel with a discreet reminder, "Here, simple saves more than a giant sign." Outside near the stream, I traced new marks in the mud. Broad curving calligraphy heading from the yard toward deeper shade. Lines drawn in thick pencil. They weren't fresh, shaded already by the night, but they told of her passage. I caught myself giving thanks for the plank pathway we'd drawn, like a person grateful for a bridge after crossing it. And I thought of all the easy titles I could have written. Monster in the Wood, Impossible Serpent, and how much work this sawmill would face to undo fear for fear's sake if I chose the wrong line. I stepped into the maintenance shed to record conversation. The wall carried PPE notices side by side with a saint's image, grease and tools stacked into the overlapping reality of a place that has no time for myth when bills come due. I asked Joel if the story would grow into exaggeration in the neighborhood. He shrugged. It always does. We answer with procedure. And he listed the times they had found bats, armadillos, beehives, even a queera nesting inside a log's hollow. Beasts like a good house. and trees know how to build better houses than people. Anaconda, he said, is rare in the yard, but not impossible. Not in a Brazil stitched all over with water. And in either case, the gesture is the same. Open space, lower the noise, return the path. Later, I pulled my phone to send a preview to the team in the US. I wrote, "This isn't a scream video, it's a rule video." I listed the key scenes, the slowed blade, the hollow's mouth, the head at the rim, the plank corridor, the disappearance into the stream, and cut out every frame designed to provoke just for show. The algorithm loves shock, but the yard loves routine, and my commitment was with the people who gave me coffee, order, and trust. My editor replied, "Where's the size?" And for the first time in a long time, I felt no urge to measure anything for anyone's approval. By late afternoon, as the heat turned to veil, Joel gathered everyone and with few words redrew routine. An extra sleeper in the area for hollow logs, a rod with a mirror fastened at the end to check openings before leaning in, a new hand sign for animal inside, 2 hammer taps on the guardrail to drop the yard volume without panic. "We didn't bring fear into the yard," he said. "We brought memory." And that difference stayed rooted to the ground like the shadows of the timber piles, long and steady. I lingered until the saws fell silent. The city answered with its own noises, motorcycles, radios, neighbors. At the gate, Leandro caught up to me, half smiling. Today I checked 2 hollows and waited. I'll sleep better for it. Raimundo, behind him, added, "Nervous wood, nervous beast, nervous man. Her calm corridor helps all 3. I thanked them, filmed the last shots of the teaching panel with its polished tunnel, and promised to send a printed copy of the story for the lunchroom, the kind of simple promise worth more than a forgotten link. At the hotel, I reviewed the images. There was no monster, only method. The tree as house, the saw as a key that opens by accident, the men as improvised doorkeepers who chose to be floor instead of wall, and I, who usually came home counting with numbers and measures, returned this time with the 3 lines Joel taped to the wall, and which, if up to me, I'd post on every story about big animals. Slow down, don't stick your face in, draw an exit. The rest is noise. Here remained good silence, the kind wood keeps when a house empties in peace. If they ask me for a punchline, I'll give the one that fits. They opened the wood and found the anaconda's home. It wasn't an epic fright, it was an agreement. And in the Brazil, I learned to respect. An agreement is worth more than a myth. If this story helped you understand the river's signs, subscribe now and hit the bell. Every week we bring a new episode with real survival and wilderness techniques. Which sign would you have ignored? Leave a comment below and share with anyone who loves the Amazon.